Do not laugh, my dear. At that time and place, that was a considerable recommendation. Joe began teaching me politics. The first place he took me was to a saloon. Lest you should think ill of me, the saloon owner, you see, was a very important man in the neighborhood. It was necessary for us to get his vote and his endorsement. Therefore, we went to see him by appointment, forsooth. We went to see this gentleman. We walked into his establishment. There he was, giant. I never saw such a huge white apron, vast handlebar mustache. When you shook hands with this man, your hands simply disappeared altogether. It was like shaking hands with the flipper of a seal. This colossus was named Hyacinth Valentine. I swear a man could not make up such a thing. He was very friendly. He greeted me in a very friendly way, and he offered me a free glass of beer. I declared that I did not consume alcoholic beverages. And I saw that he was suddenly looking at me in a somewhat less friendly way. I saw that I'd made a mistake. I made my next mistake a moment later in the matter of the excise tax. He said that if I were elected, he hoped I would do something to reduce the tremendous amount of tax that he was required to pay to run his establishment. I said, well, how much do you pay? He said $200. I said, that's not nearly enough. You ought to be paying twice that. Whereupon, I felt the iron grip of old man Murray on my arm. He hauled me out into the street and on the spot devised a new campaign strategy. He would conduct the election if I would go home and solicit campaign contributions from my father's wealthy friends. We did this and I won. And I became the youngest member of the New York Assembly at the age of 23. And I spent 3 terms there, eventually rising to the position of minority leader. And I began there to learn politics, which has been called the art of the possible. I believe that is an excellent definition of politics. And I went on from there. I became United States Civil Service Commissioner, and then I became Police Commissioner of New York City. Now here, I brought with me some more photographic or documentary proof, but I show you this one only upon condition that you promise not to laugh. Oh, never mind. There we are. Now, I do not know to this day I am someone. Now, my dear, it's not that funny. She's Yes. Well, now, here's the problem, you see. Mulberry Street, that's where the police headquarters was. That much is perfectly clear. What is unclear is if the artiste thinks either I am an awfully good watchdog or some sort of wild animal that needs to be chained up. I am not sure to this day what the true interpretation of this cartoon may be. But I became police commissioner in New York City. And while there, I beg your pardon, while police commissioner, I was able to put into practice the wisdom contained in my favorite saying. Now, you may have heard that I am fond of the old West African proverb, speak softly and carry a big stick, you will go far. I am fond of that, but not nearly so much as this one. You know, if you don't read Edgar Allan Poe, it occurs to me that perhaps you don't read Squire Bill Widener. I was afraid of that. Squire Bill Widener is a wonderful American essayist of about 100 years ago. Very funny writer. He was a sort of Mark Twain in embryo. And his essays are filled with homely wisdom. And in one of his essays, he says this: do what you can with what you've got where you are. It's the best lesson I ever learned in politics or in life. Now, when I was police commissioner in New York City, we received a telegram from Europe informing us that a man by the name of Rector Althart was coming to preach in New York City. What this man may have been rector of, if anything, I do not know. But everyone knew why he was coming to New York. He was an anti-Semite, a Jew hater. And all over Europe, he preached what he called sermons against the Jewish people. He preached that the Jews had murdered Jesus Christ. He preached that the Jews drank the blood of Christian babies. People believed this sort of nonsense. And so the Jewish leaders came to me because I was police commissioner. And they said, you must not permit this man to say these dreadful things. I said that I could not prevent him, and indeed, I would not prevent him. In the United States of America, unless a man actually incites to riot, he must be allowed to speak his opinions, no matter how loathsome his opinions may be. And these gentlemen left in no very good frame of mind with me, I can tell you. And I sat and thought, what could I do? And it came to me. I called in a young officer, Otto Raphael by name, wonderful young officer. I'd recruited him for the force myself. And I said, look, Otto, how many Jewish police officers do you suppose we've got on the force, all told? And he said he thought not very many, perhaps only 30 or 40. I said, that's plenty. Get them together. I've got an assignment for them. 3 mornings later, there they were on the parade ground, 7 o'clock in the morning, dressed uniforms, splendid bunch of looking young men. I called them the Maccabees. And I gave them their assignment. Yes, there's a man who's read his Bible. I knew I liked you. I called them the Maccabees after Judah Maccabea, the Jewish warrior who threw the remnants of Alexander the Great's empire out of Jerusalem in 154 BC, beginning the festival of Hanukkah. So I gave these young men their assignment. I made them bodyguard to this man, Althard. And I did one other thing. I wrote letters to the newspapers. At that time, there were 11 daily newspapers in New York City. I wrote them all letters informing them what I had done. And within 2 days, there was an article in every single newspaper in New York City about how this loathsome and disgusting man was going to be allowed to come to New York City and preach his poisonous evangel against the Jewish people, and he'd be allowed to do it in perfect safety because he would be bodyguarded by a special detachment of 40 of New York City's finest police officers, handpicked by the commissioner himself, and every one of them a Jew. And he quickly became a laughingstock and went back to Germany, where he belonged. You do what you can with what you've got where you are. Best lesson I ever learned. And I went on from there. I became Undersecretary of the Navy. And then we had war. Ever since the time of Christopher Columbus, the Spanish Empire has maintained a military garrison in the island of Cuba. They treated the people abominably right on our doorstep, not to mention the violation of the Monroe Doctrine, and I thought we ought to throw them out by armed force if necessary, and I said so loudly and often. Therefore, when war finally came, I felt that I must go. I resigned from the Navy. I joined the Army. I formed a volunteer regiment of cavalry. Now, this was a splendid bunch of young fighting men. We had Sioux and Arapaho riders from the plains. We had cowboys and deputy sheriffs from the territories. We had Chicago firemen and New York City policemen. We had athletes. We had the polo champion of the United States. We had the tennis champion of the United States. We had, I am embarrassed to say, the entire Yale rowing team. I don't know where the Harvard boys were. I called these young men the children of the dragon's blood. The newspapers called us the Rough Riders. We were a cavalry regiment, 1,000 men strong. We were going to get on our horses, charge up the hill, and throw the Spanish Empire out of the New World. The only problem was that there was no room on the boat for our horses. And therefore, when the moment came, we were obliged to run up the hill. But we did. When the moment came, I said, gentlemen, Almighty God and a just cause are on your side. Gentlemen, charge! I'm very proud of that. I will have you know that that is the shortest political speech in American history. One word. On the strength of that one word, I became a war hero. Whether I had any business being a war hero is entirely another question. Well, first of all, there are these things. Here, have a look through these, my young friend, and tell me what you see. Yes, it's awful, isn't it? That's what I see without them. So I was terrified because we were in deep jungle in Cuba, and I was terrified that I should lose my spectacles or break them and consequently lose my soldiers and be court-martialed for it. I had to sew extra pair into the tops of my boots and into the lining of my coat and the top of my hat, 11 extra pair in fact, because I was so terrified I should lose them. And then, of course, there was the matter of my sword. Well, I was an officer, lieutenant colonel, thank you very much. I was therefore entitled to carry a sword. I thought it romantic to carry a sword, and I therefore carried a sword. I quickly discovered that the only thing it was good for was to get caught between my feet and make me fall down, usually in front of the men. But I claim this much credit. Within one day, 24 hours, I lost it. And therefore I did not have to admit what a fool I had been to bring the thing in the first place. And I became a war hero, whether I liked it or not. Actually, I liked it just fine. And I became governor of New York State and eventually vice president of the United States of America. I did not want to be vice president. Have any of you any idea what the Vice President of the United States of America does? Neither have I. I must not say that. That is not true, because I am sure that many of you are verse by verse and article by article familiar with the Constitution of the United States, and therefore you know that the Vice President of the United States does indeed have one constitutionally mandated duty. He is required to preside over debates in the Senate. In fact, if you will read the Constitution, you will find that the Vice President's official title is President of the Senate. He must preside. He has a gavel. He maintains order. And if a tie-breaking vote is required, he is to cast the tie-breaking vote. But in the meanwhile, he is not permitted to speak. He is not permitted to say anything. He cannot bring forth his opinion on any, for or against any of the great issues of the day. Well, you've known me for almost an hour now. Can you imagine me not talking? Of course not. Therefore, I did not want to be vice president. But I was dragooned into it. At the Republican convention, the nominating convention in 1900, there were 882 votes for me and 1 vote against me, my own. And I became Vice President of the United States. And I thought that I would retire. I had a friend who was a lawyer. I asked him to do research for me to determine if it would be an honorable thing, if there was any legal and proper precedent for a vice president to simply retire and go and be a teacher of history in a university, because I've always loved history. But then, of course, as you know, a very dreadful thing happened. William McKinley, our president, was shot and killed. This was a dreadful way for me to come into the presidency, but it would have been far worse to be morbid. Even here, I could hear my father's voice: seize the day, get action, never dwell on sorrow. I did that. I did exactly what I had done at college all those years before. I worked as hard as I could, and I am very proud indeed of what I did when I was president. However, I will tell you only one thing, and for this reason. I begin to see faint signs of weariness. I do not know why this is. The older I become, the more often I see this. And when I speak, people grow weary. I do not understand that, because when I speak, I grow positively invigorated. However, there you are. I see it as a fact, and I must deal with it. So, I will tell you only one thing. When I was President of the United States, I was able to set aside over 230 million acres of public land for public use. And that, my friends, means you. And that is important. I must speak to you of that, no matter how briefly. And I suppose that now is as good a time as any to speak of the teddy bear. My friend, will you hold this for me? Yeah, I shall want it back. In the year 1902, I went on a bear hunt. It was my intention to shoot a bear, or several bears if I possibly could, but I could not find one. We were in Mississippi. It was the middle of March. It was cold and raining. We rode uphill and downhill and uphill and downhill for 3 days, and the dogs never even got scent of a bear. So my guide, in an effort to please me, managed to catch in a trap a very old, very sick female bear. This poor creature was obviously dying and obviously in great pain. And he chained her to a tree so that I could shoot a bear. I was so outraged at this that I swore. I could not imagine looking my children in the face. Well, we had a cartoonist with us, a man by the name of Cliff Berryman, old friend of mine, and to commemorate this event, he drew a cartoon. This cartoon. Now, you will permit me to say that he's made my figure perhaps a trifle stout, but awfully noble, you see, refusing to shoot the bear. Now, look what else he's done. In the picture, he's made it a cub, a cute little baby bear. In real life, it was a very old sow, but I suppose that is artistic license. In any event, this cartoon was in many newspapers, and when I got back to Washington, D.C., there was a letter waiting for me. A man in New York City wrote me a letter in which he informed me that his name was Morris Mitcom, and that he was a maker of toys for children. And he wanted to know, would it be all right if he would make a bear, a toy for children, and name it after me? Well, I did not understand. I thought he meant he was going to call the thing Roosevelt, you see. But I wrote him back and said, well, I did not believe that my name was going to do him any good in the bear business, but that if he wished to do so, he might do so. And then, thank you, my friend, the next thing I knew, these things were everywhere. It was worse than hasten forward quickly there. I could never live it down, never lived it down. But I am glad of it in a way. One moment here. Let me see. Sit. Good bear. It gives me an excuse to speak of this subject, which is of such great and vast importance. I mean, of course, the conservation of our great natural resources. We have in this country two things which set us apart from, and if I may say, above the other nations of the earth. The first of these things, my friends, is you. I have been all over the world. I can tell you that the American people are like no other people on earth. You may be justly proud to call yourselves Americans. And the other is a gift. A gift we have not earned. It was simply given to us. The vast abundance of natural resources which we see everywhere we turn. The forests, the oil, the coal, the water power. These things will make this nation the most powerful nation on earth and the greatest force for good that the world has ever seen. But more than that, far, far, far more than that, the great beauties of this land are more valuable. I mean, we spoke earlier, my young friend and I, about the grim beauty of the Badlands. Have any of you been to the sequoia forests in Northern California? I camped out among those trees with John Muir. Trees 300 feet high. Some of them 3,000 years old. These trees were old when Julius Caesar walked on earth. We lay in our sleeping bags and gazed up at the winter stars through the canopy of those magnificent trees, and I can tell you that no cathedral ever conceived in the passion of the Middle Ages is as great and as grand a testament to God's grace as those mighty trees. And all of those great wonders belong to you. They do not belong to any government or any millionaire or any corporation. They belong to you, but they belong to you in stewardship, not in ownership. That means that we must take care of them. and pass them on when the time comes in better shape than when we got them. And that is a battle we are losing. And my friends, if I may say it myself, you are looking at a man who does not like to lose a battle. I will give you just two examples. When I was President of the United States, a group of wealthy men, entrepreneurs, came to the White House and told me that they had a plan. They had a plan, you see, to improve the Grand Canyon. I mean that. A man could not make, it is like Hyacinth Valentine. It is a thing a man could not make up. It developed, however, that their idea of improvement meant that they wished to build a railroad in the Grand Canyon, that they wished to build hotels in the Grand Canyon, and that they wished to put advertisements, billboards, on the walls of the Grand Canyon. Eat Campbell's soup! I yield to no one in my admiration for Campbell's soup, a fine American corporation. But I will not have billboards on the walls of the Grand Canyon. I told these men this was an abomination and that they were abominators. I said, I will not permit this. I will declare the place into a national park. I will not let this happen. They said, you can't do that. There's no law that gives you the power to simply create a national park by declaration. I said, there is a law, the Newlands Reclamation Act of 1902, that gives me the right to declare a presidential bird sanctuary. Is there not? They said, well, yes, there is. I said, I hereby declare the floor of the Grand Canyon a presidential bird sanctuary. I said, there is a law, the Antiquities Act of 1907, which gives me the power to declare a presidential monument. Is there not? They said, well, yes, there is. I said, I hereby declare the wall of the Grand Canyon a presidential monument. Next case. You do what you can with what you've got, where you are. Best lesson I ever learned. Here is just one more example. This is a much smaller and much more homely example from my own experience. In the year 1902, I took a walk around the grounds of my estate on Long Island, and I wrote down the name of every species of bird that I saw in one day, 24 hours. I saw a little green heron and a night heron. I saw a red-tailed hawk and a yellow-billed cuckoo. I saw a kingfisher, a flicker, a hummingbird, a swift, a meadowlark, a red-winged blackbird, a sharp-tailed finch, a song sparrow, a chipping sparrow, a bush sparrow, a purple finch, a Baltimore oriole, a cowmonting, a robin, a wood thrush, a thrasher, a catbird, a scarlet tanager, a red-eyed vireo, a yellow warbler, a black-throated green warbler, a kingbird, a wood pewee, a crow, a blue jay, a cedar bird, a Maryland yellow-throated chickadee, a black and white creeper, a barn swallow, a eight-breasted swallow, an ovenbird, a thistlefin, a vesper finch, an indigo bunting, a towhee, a grasshopper, a sparrow, and a screech owl. 42. But alas, my friends, if you go there today, you will not see all of these birds. Some of these are now extinct, and some are so rare that it is remarkable indeed if one ever sees one. And that is a loss. Not for me, but for you. So, I hope that you will permit me, in the 1 minute that I have left to speak to you, I hope you will permit me to presume upon the privilege of my age and preach to you, just a little, about the future. Because we have the future with us. I told you I would burden you. Here is your future. Here. These are your elders. I am your elders. But I am gone. My entire generation is gone. If you wish to meet me, you must read a history book. And your parents and your teachers, they are the generation of the here and the now. But you, my young friend, you are the future. And you. And you. Much depends upon you. There can be, there will be, without you, no future. Therefore, love life, do your duty. God bless you. Whoa! Well, that's it. Thank you very much. As the politicians, oh wait, there's the best part. Actually, it hasn't yet come. Here we go. Ow! Wow. Now, that, as the politicians say, is the end of my prepared remarks. And this is not a school assembly program. There's not going to be a test on any of this. But if anybody has questions, I will try to answer. Sir? Yes. Eleanor Roosevelt was the daughter of Theodore's brother Elliot, and indeed, and was Theodore's favorite niece. He just loved her to pieces. He was the one who gave her away at the White House when she was married to Franklin. He said to Franklin, he said, "Well, son, it's a good thing to keep the name in the family." Yes, she was his niece. Sir? Franklin belonged to, I've seen a full family tree, and it just gives me a headache. It's very difficult to follow. They were fifth cousins. Franklin was the child of the Jacobus line of the Roosevelt family, who all lived out on Long Island, and they married a lot with the Delano family. And Franklin's mother, fierce old dragon lady, Sarah Delano, was one of that great line of aristocrats. And they married into the family of the Jacobus Roosevelts, and Franklin was the product of that line. Theodore was the product of the Von Schack Roosevelts, who were all New York City Roosevelts. So that Theodore was a whole generation older than Franklin, but they were cousins. Yeah. Anybody else? Sir? Well, for those of you who don't know, when Roosevelt was 55, he decided that he was going to go down on an exploring mission in Brazil. And actually, they weren't originally going to go down the River of Doubt. That kind of came up while they were there. But it was one of the most idiotic things. I mean, he was 55 years of age. He was at least 45 pounds overweight. He'd been working at a desk for 30 years. But he decides to go down this wild, untamed river, which had never been explored before. It was a tributary of the Amazon. They knew where it came out, but they didn't know where the headwaters were. And it very nearly killed him. And somebody asked him, "Why'd you go?" I mean, it's this idiotic thing to do. And he said, "Oh, it's my last chance to be a boy." So he was not one to flinch or to regard. If a thing was fun and romantic and heroic, he didn't care if it was idiotic. In the fight, this is the same thing in the fighting in Cuba. He conducted himself with a degree of courage that bordered on idiocy. One night after the fighting, he put on his dress uniform and went up to the top of a hill, of a ridge, and started walking back and forth so that the Spanish sharpshooters could shoot at him. And everybody said, "Well, why did you do this?" And he said, "Well, you know, our boys were not, they were a little backward today. They weren't charging right to the front like I thought they should. And I think they were a little afraid, so I've just shown them there's nothing to be afraid of." Never was a man like him. Never, ever, ever. A profoundly great man, though, in my opinion, and we are living his legacy today, even if we don't know it. So I guess that's it. Thank you for coming. You've been a small group, but mighty and valiant, my favorite. So thank you very, very much. Thank you. Whoa.